Emancipation. The movie begins with a family man with his family having very intimate conversations because he has just learned that he has been sold to a new owner. And just when the conversation even gets much more intimate, the new owners send their guards to get him. He tries to resist, but he's eventually carried into a wagon and they are taken away to this Armageddon of a new field. Conditions here are very hostile and slaves have to survive. Over here, slaves who are recalcitrant are dealt with mercilessly by their masters. Sometimes they are simply whipped, or the slaves are simply just shot dead and pushed into a deep pit. And the owners also have dogs that they send after slaves who attempt to run away from the camp. And if you run away and you are caught, you are also branded. Upon arriving there and witnessing all the hostile conditions, Peter decides to run away and find his way back to his family. He manages to convince some of his colleagues to follow him on this particular journey. However, there's a problem. They have to run through the swamps in order to be able to make the journey across. The day comes around and the guys make the run. However, one of them fails not to cross the river, therefore allowing the dogs to catch him up, and the slave masters eventually shooting him dead. Peter and his other colleagues decide to split up so that the dogs do not smell them, and they keep running through the forest. Upon several other attempts, almost everybody is killed except Peter, who almost makes it across. But finally, the owner catches up with him and tells him to beg for his life. My intention is not to ruin this film for you. Please try and watch this film, as it is a very great film. However, we are going to be talking about the negatives and positives and all the details and whether this film is worth the watch. Today, I'm connecting with OBL so that we have a conversation on the good, the bad, and the ugly of emancipation.
This film is not about slavery, believe it or not. In the words of Will Smith himself,
it's not a movie about slavery. It's a movie about freedom. It's a movie about family. It's a movie about love.
But it's actually set within a slavery setting. We have seen Emancipation. It's been a very great film. What are your general thoughts about this film?
Wow. I've always loved every movie that I see Will Smith in it. And this obviously was not an exception. Emancipation is a very nice movie. After this huge controversy about Will Smith with the Oscars, I wasn't really expecting to see maybe any nice movie about him in just recently. But Emancipation is something that I really watched over and over. I watched it 3 times, and I was very excited. He killed the role of Peter. He acted it so well. The director was also very good. And, every aspect of the film looks very nice. And for me as a filmmaker, I kind of enjoy the cinematography and then the color grading, even though there were some little bit inconsistency, which I'll be talking about later. But generally, I think this is a film that I think anyone who really wants to know much about the story of the so-called Peter should probably watch this movie. It speaks a lot about slavery and how they got emancipated, or let me say free, okay, or liberated, when Lincoln signed for them to be a free people. Okay, so that is it. For me, I think it's a very nice movie. Everyone should try and watch it.
Right, great. I think for me, the acting was really very much on point, and I want to say a very big shout out to the makeup artists, because the makeup in the film was really so great. As you can see from the behind scene, I mean, the hair and how they were able to blend most of the stuff with the background. And for me, one thing that stood out to me the most, like I said, still along the lines of makeup and costume. I mean, I think for the same reason why most film critics criticize our recent masterpiece from Africa, that is The Woman King, was because some of the costume looked, I mean, they were so nice to be true, but in this particular film, you can realize that even though they are nice, but they are true, they belong to the scene, because we are coming into the character's life after, these are characters who are like 20, 40, 50, 70 years old. And so once we are coming into their lives, most of their clothes and what they wear, where they live, they all look used, because they've been living a life before we came into that life at that particular point in time. And so I think that's one part of the film that stood out to me the most, and it's really very great. I think Obil has already spoken about the issue of the color grading, which I personally think it's really been very great. But let me ask you, Obiel. For me, one of the most intriguing aspects of this whole thing was from this behind scene, as you can see. This film was actually shot on a red. I mean, for some of us, we've all known that Ari has been very popular. Why do you think this choice was made? I mean, it was quite strange for me, though.
Yeah, I strongly think that they probably have a very good reason for using the red from what we saw in the behind scenes. I'm not very sure if the whole film was actually shot on red, but red cameras have been noted for shooting scenes where there is high speed motions, because of their ability to shoot in very high frame rate so that they can slow it down in slow motions. But I didn't see this in the film. I didn't see a lot of slow motions in the film. So I want to believe the cinematographer, the DOP, or the director had a very good reason why they had to go with red. But like I said, I'm not very sure if everything was actually shot on red. But you can see that the choice of the camera really doesn't matter, because when you look at the kind of color grading they did over there, I want to believe this was probably pre-planned before they got there. Because we all know about the ARRI cameras, and we know that they have very good effect when it comes to the color of the skin. ARRI gives you the true color of the skin, and that is why most Hollywood films will mostly go in for the ARRI when probably it has got to do with skin color. It gives you the best roll-off, and then you get the best skin color from the ARRI cameras. So maybe because they already knew they were going for that kind of a bleach color grading, they really didn't want to probably spend the budget to go in for an ARRI color. After all, you will not be seeing the true skin color. And speaking of the color, I think it's mostly a very difficult choice to go in for when it comes to these kind of films. You need to go in for a color that particular tells the story, helps tells the story. And I think Antoine probably and whoever came together to decide this, they took the right step, because it gives you that feel. You get that feel of being or watching a film that was probably shot in the 18-something, you understand, where color was not that much. So it was a very good choice, but unfortunately there were some inconsistencies in it. Okay, this is the negative part of it, even though we do agree with them that the bleach color style was very nice. But then there were instances where you could see green popping in, and then at a point in time you see red dominating in, and then all of a sudden there are times that the whole color is gone, everything is gone. And I want to believe the editor or the color grading artist was probably using these effects to tell the story, not general like the whole story, but then when it gets to a particular scene, it feels there should be a color here and that kind of thing. So, but for us viewers, some of us saw it to be inconsistent, and we were wondering whether is this a mistake or it's an artistic choice. So that's what I think about the camera and the color grading.
Yeah, so I think I totally agree. That's one area that I think filmmakers out there like us who are what they call independent filmmakers can really pick a lot of great lessons from stuff like this, because whether it was a mistake or whatsoever, the general color grade in this sense kind of worked very well to help tell the story. And like we always say, don't just use an equipment because you have it, but it has to work within the context. And so in this case, the costume, the color grading, everything was working in tandem to give that intended effect that the directors wanted to push out. At least that is how I felt watching it. I know art is very, very subjective. This piece might hit someone totally differently. And of course, everybody will certainly have their opinion on this particular thing. So talking about independent filmmakers, I think when I saw the video that was posted by Will Smith himself on his YouTube channel, I didn't realize that production had to go on break for a very long while. That is because, as usual, this film was actually shot on set. In comparison, this is the behind scene from 300 Spartans. And as you can see, the whole film was actually shot in a studio. And there are lots of films like this, which are usually shot. The locations are created in the studio and they shoot it. But interestingly, in Emancipation, they decided to go out and shoot. And I know this will be interesting to you, OBL, because of the kind of filmmaking that we do here, because it looks like we're all at the playing field. It's like it's time for big budget productions to have a feel of the challenges that we those without that money also go through, because production had to break for several months because of hurricane, and even days where they had production, they had to wait for lightning and some slight showers of rain. I mean, how does this whole film and learn about these challenges inspire you in terms of your style of filmmaking?
Yeah, well, I was fascinated and quite surprised that they actually went into the exact location where the slavery actually happened.
Right.
At that point, you get to the director said that you are like where the events took place, and then you can just feel the energy from there. You can feel the challenge. And I feel telling the story itself was quite challenging for them too. And you also realize that the challenges were in different folds. It was quite challenging for Will Smith himself and the actors to go through the forest the way it is. This is not like, it wasn't like in the studio where probably everything was laid down for them, but they probably just head on unexpected. And then, they picked up so many issues, and they were against the forces of nature. And aside the challenges that the actors were going through, which is in one part, the other part has got to do with probably the technical aspect of it, where the camera and the sound guys, how they had to move, understand, through the forest. That's quite challenging, because this was a swamp area. They had gone to a place where it was full of mud and water. So you might probably see a very nice location, but then how to get a camera there would be probably a bit challenging, even though we don't have the behind scenes of how they really got to some of the locations. But I'm sure they might have had some very nice locations, but then they just couldn't get there because probably it was probably very difficult to go there with the camera. But the actors could have gone there. And I'm so happy that Will Smith took up the challenge to do this. It's not easy, it's not easy. And I kind of relate with that, because this is what we go through here in Africa. You understand? When we see the nice location, no matter what, we want to shoot over there. So it becomes challenging for the actors, and it becomes challenging for us. And then at the same time, what makes it nice for us is that we do not have all these big gadgets like they have. So it's easy for us to also easily get to those locations and then shoot. So this was what I was quite fascinated about. And I think it's time we start looking ahead into the future and see how filmmaking can be made with less and huge equipment. But we should look at, I'm sure technology is bringing this to us. You understand? Cameras are becoming smaller, gimbals are becoming smaller and easy to carry. So it will get to a point where those challenges will be a thing of the past, and then we should be able to shoot at any location that we find ourselves.
Yeah, I think for me that's really very true, because if you also look at the lightning, even though it was most of the scenes were taking place in the open, I realized they did use lots of negative fill a lot. As you can see, what they are carrying here is to rather cut out more light than introducing more light into the scene, and it also adds up to the final look, because if you look at it, it had a little bit of the blacks where it looks a little bit crushed because it's kind of moving towards a much more black and white feel. So enough of the positives. Let me find out from you, what are the key things that did not go so well for you?
Yeah, for me, the story, the title of the film is Emancipation, right?
Right.
I mean, so Antoine, the director, was telling the story from when Peter was liberated, or he took the opportunity to liberate himself, because even though he overheard people talking about that Lincoln had signed that the blacks should be made free, Peter capitalized on it, had the missed opportunity, and liberated himself, you understand? But then they were pursuing him. So the story is about that liberation, where the man lives, where Peter leaves camp, where he leaves the point of slavery, and then running to search for his freedom.
Through the swamps, yes.
Yeah, through the swamps, in seek of his freedom to go back to his family. But then I felt, what brings us to the story itself was the picture of Peter, the real picture of Peter. And then the marks behind Peter had so much to talk about. And I felt if Antoine or the story could have said something small about it, then we could understand that it is this sort of marks that he was running away from. Do you understand? Because we only saw the point where, yes, he was engaged in the construction of railway lines. But then what was he really running away from? He was just running away from that particular work. But then no, there is something behind. So each mark on the back of Peter had something to say. And I felt if we had seen it, then we could have all agreed with Peter that he was justified to run away from this sort of brutality. Because when they were taking the picture, they did say it, that we want people to really see what slavery is all about. So for me, I like the story. Yes, I agree that the director is right to tell the story between where the man started running from. But then I feel they could have showed us what really the man was running away from.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think if you look at this particular scene here where the woman decides to put her hand into the machine, if you look closely, she cuts her whole hand inside. And in this particular ending part, you realize that we are only introduced that it's just her hand, just the finger part of the hand that is affected. That for me seemed a little bit quite strange. I don't know your take on it, because I was expecting that it's either she lost her whole arm, and even if she didn't lose it, I was still expecting to see some bruises or some sort of sores around the whole hand. But unfortunately, it's just the fingers area. I don't know your take on this.
Yes, so you're right. You're right because when you look at that particular scene, the camera actually didn't give us a close-up of how the hand really got affected. But if you see the way the hand was dragged into the machine, we expect to see some bruises and scars up into the hand. But it almost looked like it was just this part of the hand. Yeah. And they didn't even let us see the nature of the wound. They just covered it, and the hand looked too fresh. You understand? So, well, I also agree that this is one challenge of it that should have really showed us some form of bruises up there. Even they are not even bruises, and they are even scars that we can really understand. And then speaking of that, you realize that there was a point where Will Smith was instructed to carry this dying old man.
Yeah.
Yes, to probably a mass grave. They were trying to bury all of them over there. So where he picks the man, you can see that is a real man. You can see the trousers. But then when they cut to where he is now getting the man close to the grave, you can see that that's a dummy. It doesn't look like the real man again.
Yeah.
And the continuity there was very poor. I mean, it doesn't really look like that. And then from where they were also, I don't know whether it was some dead people there, but you can see that they were removing some dead people over there. Their limbs, their hands, it didn't look like real hands. They looked like dummies. But that one, I felt like they could have used like just real human beings to hang over there. It looked too dummy, and I don't know who didn't do his work right over there.
Yeah, I think that's one key thing. I think how props are handled in this film, I was a little bit disappointed in that. Talking about this, there's a scene where somebody seen with that his leg has been cut off. Then we see another person carrying that leg and going to throw it away. And the way it's being held, it just gives it away that it's a dummy. I mean, when I did my RRR review, it was one thing I spoke about how, the person held a motorbike. I think for most audience on this channel, a lot of people got it wrong because they thought what I meant was it's not possible for, a superhero to hold something like that. But the issue about more of the execution of the effect in that particular regard. Because, for example, if I hold this phone, it has mass, it has weight. And the way I hold it will be different from if I put a weightless object here. And the way I treat it will be different because of the weight. And I feel like for example, the RRR review case, when the motorbike went up, and if you look at the behind scene, it was just a small stick that he used to represent the motorbike in whining. And it kind of reflected in the final piece because the motorbike is too heavy. And as it's whining, you can feel that it's so weightless because when something is weightless, there's this little jittery motion that happens. And if the thing has a lot of weight, you kind of eliminate, because a paper, when I hold it, you see it would kind of bounce around. And that was my point for that particular film. And I feel here, even though that one was a visual effects, Here is a practical effect, and the way he's holding it, you can clearly see that the object is weightless. If it's a human flesh, you wouldn't see any jitters happening. Like you can feel that this is weighty, this is flesh, and the blood is dripping. And if you look closely at it, you realize that it kind of looks dry already, like the blood, as if the blood has been running through for some time. Meanwhile, this is just a fresh limb, or let's say a fresh leg he's supposed to be carrying across. So I think generally the way, people's interaction with the props were kind of a little bit poor for me in most of the cases. But I still feel like just like any other film, there will always be mistakes or things that might kind of go over you during production. The question is, did this take away from the production? And for me, no. So at the end of the day, those things, once something does not really take much out of the whole production, I still think those are usually pardonable mistakes, because like I said, every film would definitely, gross over some one or two things here and there because of production constraints. And whatsoever. Yes.
Yeah. So just to add some few negatives to the film, but before I say that, the issue about good actors is that when you have a good actor, then the director have less to do. You understand? So it has also got to do with like the actors, and I feel mostly the directors, when you have a good actor, then what you should concentrate on is those actors who are not very good. You tell the person to handle a particular prop or something in the movie, you need to pay attention to the way the person is holding it, else he'll give it out. Okay. So holding a hand, a leg just by one hand that way. Using two hands to give it a little bit of weight and respect to it will have probably helped with that particular scene. But then what I also realized is that Will Smith did very well. Like I said, he tried to be in character as Peter, but there were inconsistencies in his accent. Okay. We are Africans, and then when we speak English, you can see that consistency wherever you meet us. You see that consistency. But then when someone begins to act and try to speak like us, then you need to watch out for his consistency, because there are times some of the words will not sound like a true African. In this case, Peter was original from Haiti, so Will Smith needed to have that African accent, but there were inconsistencies in it. He couldn't maintain it throughout. The other thing I also noticed was that for this one, I think this one goes to the director. There was too much emphasis on the run. You understand? For more than how many minutes, all what we're just doing is watching Peter run and run and run. And if I had a choice, I would have gotten rid of some of the issues of the running. For example, like the scene where he goes to get the honey and then he gets into the boat. We just kept watching him, and like I felt like they could have reduced the number of runs to keep the story going, because we understand that he was facing challenges. But in storytelling, the more you keep emphasizing on a particular aspect of it, then the story is not moving ahead. So at least 1 or 2, 3 challenges then that would have been adequate enough to move the story ahead. But one other big thing that I felt, this one is personal, okay? But I felt Ben Foster. Ben Foster did so well. Ben Foster, it's one of my favorite actors. To be frank, he killed it over there. But then I really wanted like Will Smith to come head on with Ben Foster, because he was the main kind of like guy who was hunting these runners, and then he likes to play with his prey before he kills them. And he just didn't deserve to die by a strange bullet. We don't even know who shot him, you understand? But then I really wanted Will Smith to have gotten like head on with him. You understand? He should have gotten to a point where he runs out of bullets, and then Will Smith, Peter will have to get head on with him, and then they will fight, and then Peter will defeat him. It clearly shows that he really fought for his freedom, and because this was the main guy who was pursuing, there was the guy who was determined to bring Peter down. Okay, so I really wanted, if I was the director, I would have made Will Smith kind of like go hands-on with Peter, and then show Ben that, look, this guy is strong. He's stronger than you. What you've made him go through has made him stronger than you. And then he should have overcome him with this. So for me, these are the negatives personally for that particular part. That's what I would have done.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. I share a similar opinion because I think a lot of the scenes, whether it's the director or the editors or generally the production was kind of addicted to spectacle. When I say spectacle, the idea that this is being shot in the woods or just to actually not kill your babies too much because they really wanted to show that, you know, they really struggled or a lot really went into the production. And just the idea that being outside, I feel like they were so fascinated with it and wanted to show more of it in the films. And so they, like rightfully said, they stayed a little longer on some of the scenes that probably if you are looking at shortening this movie, you can easily take them out and the story will still really hold, like the honey parts and the long running scenes. And if you look at the behind scene here, you realize that the technology being used here is so cool, and you have, you know, really great shots. And you and I are editors, and we know sometimes how it feels, especially have good shots. Getting rid of them is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they are also a little bit guilty when it comes to the spectacle because they could have gotten rid of some of these things, but they were just so excited with the quality of the shots.
Yeah.
And I mean, how nice they are.
Yeah.
And instead of looking at the fact that, you know, they can take those out to kind of have a little bit much more shorter story, but a much more
and one thing I also noticed was that there seemed to be too much use of the drone.
Right.
All right. I don't know. They got carried away with, you know, like you said, the spectacles of the location.
Yeah.
How nice like those drone shots were. So you see that for a particular location, the use of the drone to establish the location was just quite too much. You know,
Yeah.
You see 1, 2, 3. I'm not saying this is odd, okay? I mean, people have used it in films, they've used it to narrate, they've used it to tell stories, and it works. But in this case, I felt the emphasis was just too much. The use of the drone was just too much in this case.
Yeah,
right?
I think just to conclude on that, you've already thrown a little bit of light on it. Not enough backstory to the whole Peter character. It's kind of hitting us. If you look at generally under film, how you can make your audience to empathize more or to love the character. So in this case, if you take out the color of Will Smith and not watch in the middle, how can your audience care so much about the character Peter in this particular film? I feel like they could have done more in terms of giving us much more exposition at the beginning, get us to really fall in love much more deeper with this character so that we really care about what happened to these heroes. I think this film is, from my perspective, is being driven more from the spectacle perspective and, you know, relying on the actors in that particular film. Because if, let's say, we take Will Smith out and let another character play this movie, I'm not sure your audience are going to care that much about such characters. But because this is Will Smith, I mean, people are going to care in a way. And because of the spectacle as well, people are going to kind of pay attention. So for me, if the answers to this question that if we take out spectacle and take out the big names out of the film, would audience really care about the characters? If the answer is truly no, then that means that there wasn't enough exposition. Because if there's enough exposition, I could pick that guy at my backyard here to go play that particular role, who is not really a popular person. But if we are able to let the audience give them enough backstory about how good this person is, but some flaws are going to lead to his or her downfall, the audience are naturally going to fall in love with this person. And we might not need to rely on spectacle or rely on the names that the actors have already to drive the story. So maybe let me get your concluding thoughts on this particular film. Yes.
All right. So I think the movie, despite all the few negatives that we have found, this movie is great. It's certainly going to find a place in my heart. I'm going to constantly watch it to remind me of some key things that I've noticed in it. I love the cinematography. I like the boldness in going for the kind of color grading they used in it. I like the act of Will Smith in it. I'm so impressed with the way he picked up the character Peter to act it. I like, what the director did with most of the locations, the scenes. You know, I really like that. Taking the courage to use real, not too much of studio works and then going out to shoot. It's our style. So I kind of like align with it and I really love it. And I think everybody should try and go and watch this movie if you have not watched it. It's a very nice piece of movie to watch. And for me, those of us who are in film schools and still learning, not in film schools, but those of us who are filmmakers, there's a piece that you need to watch, and then watch it the first time, just enjoy the story, and then the second time you watch to learn so many things in it. So that is my concluding remarks.
Well, thank you so much for joining in today. It's really been very great. And like I said, 2022 has blessed us with lots of great films from all over the world, most especially Hollywood and all the Indian film industries have really given us lots of masterpieces since the beginning of this year. And probably this might be our last film review for the year. I don't know. I'm not too sure because I'll be talking about some other Indian films very soon. And you'll be seeing OBL Senior himself on this channel from now on most of the times, especially when it comes to film reviews like this. And I will entreat you that if this is your first time of finding our videos, please do make sure to click on the subscribe button, because over here we do talk about cinematography, photography, editing, and all its related branches, as well as talking about most movie industries across the world. We watch movies and we learn from movies all over the world. And we are African filmmakers here. So if you are a beginner filmmaker, this is the right place to be, because we do share a lot of our experiences in making a lot of our films right here from Africa. Any last words for anyone watching OBL Senior?
Yes. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. All, not personal, just all right? And then watch out. We'll be talking more about films and then sharing with our experience with you.
Thank you so much. Make sure to click on the like button if you did get a ton of information out of this video. And we are out. We'll catch you in the next one. And until next time, as always, keep practicing filmmaking. Peace out.